Sierra Leone actually had quite a good tourism sector, didn't it? I think you had something like 100,000 visitors from France because you've got your beautiful coastline on West Africa, and you've got the biodiversity and the pygmy hippos, a very rare, kind of breed. And of course, the Civil War in the 90s really hammered your tourism, and then more recently the Ebola outbreak. But you're trying to rebuild now. So just tell us, in your view, how you think that the financing ecosystem could better serve tourism, sustainable tourism, in a developing nation such as Sierra Leone. What do you want to see in that financing?
Thank you very much, and then also to see that it's very exciting to be back, and then also to see you again. I think this is my third program which you have moderated.
Yes.
But then to more specifically on Sierra Leone. Now, of course, you have already given a brief background as a result of the fact that it was a very thriving tourism economy, and then the Civil War, and of course we have Ebola, and then of course now we have been hit by COVID. So in terms of financing for tourism, we have been able to look at it from key perspectives. The first is that if you look at the whole of Sierra Leone, there is need for overhauling infrastructural development in terms of roads, in terms of electricity, in terms of water supply. And then more so on top of that, you're talking about how do we get to the sites. You call it the national parks. How do you go to some of the islands? How do you visit some of the mountains in the north? And then how do you ensure that with the many different islands we have, how do you provide access and develop the blue economy? So one strategy which we have pushed is to have an integrated strategy to tie tourism to overall development, because of the enormity of the job to get tourism up and running. So what we have done is that if energy is undertaking some development, we make sure we tie tourism into it. The road construction, government has already identified over 21 access routes to the site. So whilst they are constructing roads, they can be able to construct that as well. We also apply that formula to health centers. So in that way, we are able to ensure that whatever financing comes for the other sector leverages on the tourism sector itself. That's one. The second one is that we have been able to benefit from grants from the World Bank. The World Bank is investing in tourism in Sierra Leone in terms of developing some sites, and then also in ecotourism as well, and getting us to be able to do some of our strategies, looking at things like education and training and island development, and then also looking at how do we ensure that the private and business sector is developed. So through that, there are many different SME solutions that are now being put together in terms of small projects. And then also there are activities that has to do with coastal communities. We are doing some work with UNDP under the JEF project, where we are looking at poor people in coastal communities. How do we get them not to be over-reliant on the coastal resources? Because we are faced with things like sand mining, poor waste management, and then also we are faced with activities of deforestation. So what government is doing, our government is planting about 1 million trees. But what is critical about this is that in an environment like Sierra Leone, like in many other African countries, for you to drive in responsible tourism is a bit of a challenge because of the fact that people depend on these resources for livelihood. So if you don't have a plan in terms of how do you bring water supply to those rural communities, how do you provide for them to things like housing, how do you provide them with education, for you to be able to drive home the responsibility of making sure that the tourism works will be a big challenge. So government has invested in things like free quality education, which is being rolled out, technical vocational training, which is also being rolled out. Government is also investing in environment. So what I'm trying to say is that if we wanted to do tourism on its own, it's going to be very difficult because of the years we've wasted because of the war, and because of the fact that the infrastructure has not been developed to a certain level. So we are doing it in an integrated fashion.
Yeah, so you need a holistic approach.
A holistic approach.
And the investment needs to touch on many sectors.
Yes.
You can't just look at
Then on the financing, we have hotels. Private sector too is investing in the construction of hotels. And of course, today we have quite a number of facilities across the country. But what does this imply in terms of having the trained manpower, which is a challenge? We have to train people who work in all these places. We're also looking at transport, because you're talking about moving people. Even if you have the best resources, you have to invest in things like transportation in order that you can have things like tour buses. I mean, we have a very good coastline, per 400 kilometers, wherein you can have things like boat tours for people to be able to do it. We have areas where people can invest in marinas. And Freetown and Sierra Leone is very strategic in terms of access to Europe, in terms of access to many different countries. And it has got a very unique ecotourism, wildlife, but then also the history itself, which is really big.
It's doing the hard sell here. It's
exactly,
working.
Exactly. So if you take Sierra Leone in itself, Sierra Leone used to be one of the best small destinations in West Africa.
Yeah.
So we are moving in that direction and trying to, of course, we have our own strategic plan. We are trying to do a very new National Tourism Act, because what we've seen is that we are driving tourism this way. We need to move from the old act and have an inclusive